Dzień dobry Państwu.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me welcome you very cordially. My name is Łukasz Cioch. It is my great pleasure and privilege to be here with you at this very important conversation about a very important time prospect for Interreg. So let me welcome our English-speaking guests right now.
Good morning to all of you joining us from abroad. It's absolutely fantastic to have you with us. My name is Łukasz Cioch and I will be your host for the upcoming 2 hours of conversation in which I hope you will also be taking an active part. Wracając do języka polskiego, tytuł naszej dzisiejszej sesji.
Let me go back to Polish. And let me just say that we are going to have the topic Think Europe, Interreg. So it is about unity, trust, community. These are the words that the entire Europe has mentioned so many times throughout the recent months. So no one needs to be convinced how important it is to build a spirit of community, especially in the multinational but also polarized worlds. Yesterday, in the opening speech, Szymon Hołownia, the Speaker of the Polish Parliament, appealed to the audience, quoting Seth Godin,
Please remember,
hope
always sells better than fear. Słowa te wypowiedział człowiek zajmujący się marketingiem, markami. Niestety,
it was a quotation from the guy who deals with brands, marketing. So
w świecie, w którym
I'm just
tak wielu
curious
wkłada niestety również tyle
right in our world, because it
budowanie
is
i
the world
wzmacnianie
in which
zasieków,
so many people
różnic pomiędzy
strengthen and build up barriers, emphasize differences between cultures. So it is even more important that the hope that the Speaker of the Polish Parliament referred to, that the hope is cultivated, that it is presented in the way which is authentic and attractive to recipients. Ladies and gentlemen, among so many questions that we are going to ask on the stage, there will be a question whether Interreg should be used as a tool to react to new challenges. Today we are going to talk about the past a little bit, about the projects that have been concluded, where the real integration has taken place, where there was a successful struggle against stereotypes. So now let us mention specific examples of cooperation within Interreg. In a moment you will see our first guest on this stage, and there will be 2 sessions, and graphic notes will be taken and they will illustrate the course of our conversation. So take photos of these notes, graphic notes, to go back to them in the future perhaps. But now let us begin. There will be a short video first.
Think Europe, do Interreg. Wspólne wyzwania, wspólne działania ponad granicami. W świecie pełnym podziałów, dezinformacji i polaryzacji, zbliżanie, wymiana doświadczeń i współpraca regionów budują i wzmacniają poczucie przynależności, empatii i wspólnego dobra. Interreg to rozwiązania, w których granice są szansą, nie barierą. To współpraca i łączenie, nie rywalizacja i podziały. To zbliżanie i porozumienie, nie ignorancja i uprzedzenia. Realizowane projekty to zarówno lokalne innowacje, atrakcje turystyczne i działania ekologiczne, jak i działania dla zdrowia, edukacji, bezpieczeństwa i partnerskich relacji. Liczba zrealizowanych projektów i osób, które na co dzień korzystają z ich różnorodnych efektów, najlepiej świadczą o sukcesie Interreg. Co przyniesie przyszłość? Jak Interreg powinien się rozwijać? Porozmawiajmy o tym bez granic.
Mówią, że jeden obraz wart jest 1000 słów.
They say that one image is worth more than 1000 words. That is why we have decided to start with the video. But obviously it was just a fraction of the projects that have been implemented under Interreg. So we are going to embark upon a journey on this stage because Interreg matters to transborder cooperation greatly. So on this journey we will start from the eastern border of Poland to the western border of Poland. So now I would like to invite our first guest. It is Karolina Kiwior. She is from SOS GOPR Foundation, SOS to the Rescue. We are going to talk about Polish and Ukrainian cooperation. So welcome, Karolina Kiwior.
Prosimy o przekazanie mikrofonu.
Please pass on the mic. Welcome to the stage.
Proszę się oswoić na tej scenie. Te Jupitery mocno uderzają w oczy, ale mam
Don't
nadzieję,
be
że czuje się pani
surprised that you are in the limelight and the stage is yours. Have fun. Welcome everyone. It is my great pleasure and I'm glad that our project has been selected among numerous projects of the eastern border. There were many of them. So I am very glad that I can present one of them because as a rescuer from the Bieszczady group, we ran another project about the adapting of astronomical observatory in Czarnochora, but perhaps I will tell you the story on another occasion. Today we are going to talk about SOS Foundation and the training center, which is located next to the Polish and Ukrainian border, like 15 kilometers away from the border, and that is why I think it is a very significant element, a very good location for such a transborder cooperation. So in this project, apart from SOS to the Rescue Foundation, apart from the mountain rescuers and the Bieszczady division, we have had participation of our Ukrainian colleagues from the Lviv voivodeship, so it is on the other side of the Bieszczady mountains, and they also provide help as rescuers to people in the mountains. And thanks to this project, we're able to establish two training centers. One of them I've already mentioned on the Polish side in Równia to the left. It was an old building, previously a primary school, and thanks to the municipality of Ustrzyki Dolne, it was renovated and it was made available to us rescuers. And in these training centers we organize various training sessions. And on the Ukrainian side, in the place called Sławsko, eastern Bieszczady mountains, close to ski resort, there was a building which was also renovated for rescuers to be there on call and organize training sessions as well. Trainings are very important because for us it is very significant. Thanks to that we can provide first aid to people in need, for people who are injured in the mountains. What do we need for that? Apart from the training, we need equipment, because a person or a rescuer cannot reach the right location far away in the mountains very fast. So thanks to the support from Interreg, we are able to buy a lot of high quality equipment. For example, vehicles like that. It is possible to transport various equipment very fast and transport rescuers very fast. And we also have what we call operational vehicles, like vans, where you have the entire command system, computers, maps, drones, and from every location in the Bieszczady mountains, even if there is no internet, no connection for the mobile phones, we can organize our mission, our operations, and we can send rescuers to the places where a person in need might be located. Then, when we reach this location via these vehicles, you have to go up the mountain. So various pieces of equipment, various tools. It is very useful in winter. You can go up the mountains. So we can also have things like that. Well, why do we need, for example, like pontoons? And then, because yes, there are also waters like rivers, fast-flowing mountain rivers in the mountains. Then bicycles, electrical bicycles, mountain bikes, and we also have tourist trails in the mountains. You can reach various places very fast. So rescuers who can provide first aid to people. The training center, a lot of equipment, phantoms like an infant phantom, an adult person phantom, and then we can say that we as the Bieszczady division, we started from the air, so we needed drones as the first team among rescuers, the first team in Europe. We started to use thermal vision and drones, defibrillators, USG machine, a portable one. We bought all of that equipment thanks to Interreg, and also transportation equipment, clothes, equipment to look for people in avalanches. So we had a possibility to buy all of that thanks to the project. And then trainings, as I have mentioned, here in Kraków. Near the Science and Technology University, there is a special chamber, and you can create conditions like with a very fast wind, like 100 kilometers per hour, and felt temperature like minus 50 degrees Celsius. And under such conditions, we were trained, and we could check how our thermal clothes and thermal measures help us to carry out and provide help. And our joint training sessions with Ukrainian colleagues, medical training, alpine training, so all kinds of trainings with participation, with policemen, with fire guards, and as I've mentioned, they are very important for us, and we may have up to 40 training sessions in a year from various sector specializations, the medical ones. And just out of curiosity, let me say it was quite haphazard, because there was a training connected with possible evacuation from a place which is at risk of war. There is a risk connected with war, so you need to evacuate people quickly, and it was organized in January 2022, so no one could have known what would happen very soon in Ukraine. So this training brought us closer to possible scenarios, how our aid may look like under war conditions. On the Ukrainian side, when unfortunately we had a period that during our project there was the COVID pandemic first, then the war broke out. It obviously made our plans more difficult. I mean, our plans for joint training sessions with our Ukrainian colleagues. Like Ukrainian colleagues were visiting us, Polish colleagues were visiting them, but we were trying to participate in joint training sessions. Members of our team went there to support the training sessions as well, and at the end of the day, they were like open days, both on the Polish side and on the Ukrainian side, and we were telling our colleagues about our projects, about cooperation. In Poland, it was organized in Równia, this training session. In Ukraine, it was organized near Lviv, in the place called Bumistrze, and we told people more about the subject matter of our work. And on the Ukrainian side, it is a subject which is not very well known actually, and people do not really know how to react and what to do if there is an accident happening in the mountains. What were the results of all these activities? As I have said, as the first team, we used drones to look for people. As the first team of rescuers in Europe, I guess, we have found a person thanks to thermal vision, thanks to a drone. We were looking for a person in the Beskidniski mountains, so near the mountains, because we also operate there, and there were like 2-meter grass, and from the ground it was impossible to see the person, so we looked from the above, from the drone, and we found the person, so he survived actually this whole accident. And that is why we started, well, thanks to Interreg, it started certain options and gave rise to certain opportunities, trainings, drones, and then we started to develop that, and at the moment we have a very good fleet of drones. And there are also other outcomes. We take advantage of these training centers for various trainings, not also internal trainings, but international ones as well. And as I have mentioned, during the Interreg, the war broke out on the Ukrainian side, and it was after just like one day when we sent a document to the technical secretary that that we would like to help because we are close to the border. So our training center could be put to good use. So we housed rescuers helping at the border. We transported equipment, medical equipment, and we transported food, humanitarian aid to Ivano-Frankivsk, Lviv. We took advantage of our international contacts, which were initiated actually during our international project. So I have to say that our spontaneous cooperation developed in new directions, and it was possible to help our friends from Ukraine. So I would say that this project and SOS Rescue and PIMREG, the other one, they brought us even closer because we had certain contacts between us before, but thanks to that we had financial capabilities which allowed us to do more, to enrich our activities both on the Polish and on the Ukrainian side, and thanks to that our colleagues from Ukraine can move towards the West a little bit because previously they didn't have opportunities like that, and now it was made possible.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much indeed.
Dziękuję.
Pani Karolino.
Thank you.
Widać, że całą sobą Pani żyje tym projektem. Przesuńmy się proszę troszkę bliżej środka sceny. To, jak Pani Karolina ceni sobie współpracę w ramach projektu, widać było nawet na poziomie komunikacji niewerbalnej. Przez całą prezentację stała Pani najbliżej unijnej flagi. Podprogowe działania. Można wysnuć też trochę nieformalnych wniosków z tej prezentacji. Jeśli ktoś z Państwa ma poczucie, że w styczniu mamy trochę za dużo słońca, w Polsce jest za ciepło, zawsze można odwiedzić komorę termobaryczną. Doświadczyć minus 50 nieopodal BH, polecamy serdecznie. A tak nieco bardziej poważnie, usłyszeliśmy o projektach, konkretnych inwestycjach, ale będąc na co dzień w kontakcie z ludźmi, którzy są beneficjentami tych inwestycji, tych konkretnych zakupów, dla przeciętnego odbiorcy to są po prostu ważne, cenne narzędzia pracy. Co w Pani odczuciu jest najważniejsze, zarówno dla polskiej strony, jak i ukraińskiej, gdy myślimy o beneficjentach, na takim bardziej osobistym może poziomie?
Ja myślę, że to jest ewidentnie ta współpraca, ta otwartość. Mam naprawdę liczne przykłady dzięki tym projektom, nawet że to otworzyło przykład naprawdę sprzed roku czasu, kiedy to Ukraina zdigitalizowała numer 112. Co to znaczy? Że w momencie, kiedy my jesteśmy w Bieszczadach, gdzieś w okolicy Tarnicy, blisko granicy z Ukrainą, złapie nas zasięg Kijowska, my potrzebujemy pomocy, no to pierwsze co i łączy nam się niestety będąc na terenie Polski. Ale dzięki właśnie współpracy, dzięki kontaktom,
dispatcher. However, thanks to our close collaboration, the dispatcher in Ukraine can call us directly and they can tell us there has been an accident in your area. They can connect with us, and thanks to the cooperation, our rescue services can be dispatched very quickly. So there are no barriers, there are no borders anymore for us. We can work together very seamlessly, and I think that's very important.
Mimo iż mówimy o granicy Unii, to fakt, że ci wszyscy ludzie znają się nawzajem blisko, skraca i ułatwia ten kontakt operacyjny po prostu na co dzień. To z pewnością ma
nawet na tej granicy, niestety jeszcze powiedzmy zamkniętej, nieotwartej, tak jak to granica Unii Europejskiej, ale nawet jeżeli się coś dzieje, to my idziemy ze strony polskiej, koledzy ze strony ukraińskiej,
We can travel to Ukraine, we can talk to our Ukrainian colleagues, and we can work together to save lives.
Bardzo dziękuję.
Thank you, Karolina. Thank you very much for this contribution. You can now relax. Once again, congratulations and thank you for being with us today.
A ja Państwa serdecznie zachęcam do pogłębiania wiedzy na temat działań i projektów realizowanych przez beneficjentów, osoby, które opowiadają o naszych projektach. Przed spotkaniem z Państwem dzisiaj czytałem bardzo ciekawy wywiad z panią Karoliną, która opowiadała o samych początkach inicjatywy, o tym, jak to oczywiście, wywiad jest po angielsku, o tym, jak nie wspominała o rodzinie, że regularnie zdarza jej się pokonywać bardzo newralgicznym momencie
how she participated in the activities right after the breakout of the war in Ukraine. So I'd like to encourage you to read that interview. And now I'd like to invite our next speaker to the floor, Sören Bollmann, the head of the Frankfurt-Słubice Cooperation Center, and Tomasz Stefański, vice mayor of the town of Słubice. Let's give them a warm round of applause to welcome them to the stage.
Panowie, jak samopoczucie?
Gentlemen, how are you?
Bardzo dobrze.
How are you doing?
Wiecie, że ta scena w tym momencie należy w całości do was.
The stage is yours now. Gentlemen, have fun. Thank you.
Dzień dobry Państwu.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello all together und guten Tag.
Wiesz co, Tomku, znamy się już od 20
Listen,
lat
Tomek, we've known each other for
i
20 years.
bardzo cenię to, dass ich auch mit dir auf Deutsch sprechen kann.
Especially appreciate the fact that we can speak German
in die
with
Doppelstadt
each other.
gekommen, Deutsch zu lernen.
We are part of
Proszę
this
Państwa,
cooperation. It's very important for us to be able to speak each other's language. I'm sure that
jakby wyglądały
you have
wasze
asked
miasta,
yourselves
wasze regiony
many
bez
times,
środków unijnych, a
how your
mianowicie
regions or
bez
cities would
Interregu.
look like without
Sören,
EU
a czy ty
funds,
umiesz wyobrazić sobie
without
nasze miasto
Interreg.
bez
Sören,
Interregu?
could you imagine our twin cities
Czyli
without
bez
the
wspólnej informacji
Interreg support,
turystycznej w domu
without
Kleistra,
joint information points,
a bez dwujęzycznego przedszkola Pinokio,
Pinocchio kindergarten,
Bez naszej
would you be able to
wspólnej marki dwumiasta,
it without our joint brand?
bez tych tysięcy mieszkańców, którzy się nauczyli języka sąsiada w Polsko-Niemieckiej Akademii Seniorów i w szkołach,
czy też bez kalendarza adwentowego, gdzie w czasie adwentu codziennie ktoś w dwumieście otwiera okienko z jakimś świątecznym wydarzeniem, czy też bez wieży Kleista, która może wreszcie w tym roku
wiem, co chcesz powiedzieć. Po prostu pusto.
każdy by robił swoje po drugiej stronie Odry, nie oglądając się na sąsiada.
Bez wspólnych inspiracji i możliwości używania języka sąsiada w innym celu niż tylko robienie zakupów.
Nie tworzylibyśmy wspólnie dwumiasta.
Co w sumie często nie jest takie łatwe.
Gdyby było takie łatwe, nie potrzebowalibyśmy wsparcia Unii Europejskiej.
Czasami ścieramy się nawet.
Tak, ale w końcu znajdujemy wspólny mianownik i idziemy dalej.
Ostatecznie udało nam się osiągnąć to wszystko tylko razem.
Polsko-niemiecka informacja turystyczna,
9 dwujęzycznych przedszkoli,
te kilkaset kursów językowych dla wszystkich grup wiekowych,
mnóstwo wspólnych imprez kulturalnych z dwumiejskim kalendarzem imprez, a w końcu po wielkich trudach nawet wieża Kleistra.
a co dopiero z naszymi planami na przyszłość?
Co byśmy zrobili z naszym europejskim ugrupowaniem współpracy terytorialnej, które właśnie tworzymy bez środków unijnych?
Teraz pracujemy zresztą również z pomocą Interregu nad wspólnymi koncepcjami nabrzeży i promenad po obu stronach Odry,
a także studium wykonalności dla drugiego mostu, które za kilka lat pozwoli nam na wyprowadzanie ruchu tranzytowego poza drogą.
a kiedy koncepcje będą już gotowe, wspólnie za 2 lata będziemy inwestować w rozwój miasta.
Tak sobie teraz myślę, gdyby nie nasza polsko-niemiecka współpraca, ja bym w ogóle nie wylądował w mieście 25 lat temu.
Zeren, przecież gdzie indziej w Europie mógłbyś w ten sposób korzystać ze swojej znajomości języka polskiego.
No tak. Frankfurt i Słubice wiele zawdzięczają Unii Europejskiej.
My osobiście też.
Interreg nas naprawdę łączy.
Interreg to bez wątpliwości jeden z najlepszych pomysłów Unii Europejskiej.
Interreg jest nam potrzebny, abyśmy mogli jako partnerzy kontynuować proces integracji europejskiej i w ten sposób stawić czoło innym krajom, gdzie zamiast współpracy panuje prawo silniejszego.
W Rosji, w Chinach, a ostatnio chyba też w Stanach Zjednoczonych.
So we are working together, and nobody is imposing their will on others. Countries such as China, Russia, they don't have programs such as Interreg. 2 years ago, Frankfurt has applied to the federal government to become home to an important international cooperation center, and you supported us in our initiative. We came up second in this competition, but still we performed quite well, and I would like to show you a video about this project.
Tu jest Europa.
Europe is here. It's in our two cities, and today it's here in Krakow. Thank you very much for your attention.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Dziękuję panowie. Wspominaliście o konkursie filmowym.
You mentioned a video competition, and I would like to tell you that I think that you had a very ambitious scenario to follow. It was quite difficult to accomplish, but you did very well. Now I'd like to ask you about something that seems quite intuitive, all of those challenges that you have been tackling with personally. Which of them would you say were the most important ones for you? You have been through a lot together, so what are the things that you can remember best? I think that in terms of the contemporary challenges, what I can say is that I am personally very much involved in bringing down borders. I remember when I started studying in Frankfurt, I had to cross the border, I had to have my passport, a special visa, Aufenthaltsgenehmigung, that's what the name was. But then we had the Schengen regime that was launched, and there were no more border checkpoints. However, recently, some of that has been re-established, and that is a problem for us because the traffic has become much more congested, both on the Polish and on the German side. So that is one of the most pressing challenges right now. The projects implemented under the Interreg program and the ones that we are still planning hopefully will help us to resolve those issues. I think that I would mention the COVID-19 pandemic. The very first days, the borders were closed, and it seemed to us that we were traveling back in time, 30 years. And also the perception of the pandemic was quite different on the Polish and on the German side, and it was very difficult for us to sympathize and to understand what our colleagues on the other side of the border were experiencing and feeling. We had to reinvent a way for us to work together digitally, but we managed to overcome all that thanks to our deep trust that we had to each other. And even though we were all anxious, we managed to work together well. Tomek, you mentioned the symbolic return to border checks. And now I'd like to ask you about new challenges. When we are thinking about the new financial perspectives, what are the new challenges that you could identify? We are creating EUWT. That's something that we have been discussing for quite some time. It's a joint legal framework for our close cooperation, and that's something that we need already, and we are working on our joint ideas for building another bridge to unite or bring our cities closer together, and we would also like to invest in more new projects together. I think this new concept will also help us to finance a municipal bus that we have and that crosses the border and brings people closer together. Right now we cannot fund this transportation center under the municipal budget of Słubice because the bus crosses the border, so hopefully the new solutions will help us. Maybe we can also build a swimming pool together, so we just want to be closer together. And my final question, maybe it will be easy, maybe it will not be that easy, but let me tell you that one of the most famous business people at the University of Stanford said that you can only connect the dots looking backwards. So what do you think were the most important personal experiences that we have had, that you have had so far? Well, I don't think it's an easy question, but I think the most important thing for me personally, I would say, were the friendships that we have established over the years. Yes, as I said, we're trying to overcome borders. We are trying to dismantle also our mental barriers that are very often rooted in stereotypes. So I think the friendships that we have established is something that has been especially important to me personally, and hope something more important than anxiety and fear. What would you like to add? Well, I would like to say that I am very thankful for being able to live in this twin city area, and I'm thankful for being able to pitch into this European cooperation. I'm happy that I was able to learn this difficult but beautiful Polish language. Yes, it's quite difficult, but it's worth doing. I personally know some foreigners who have been living in Krakow for 20 years, and they have not mastered the Polish language yet. Once again, thank you and congratulations to you.
Ja tak nieco specjalnie przyznam się Państwu szczerze, dałem nieco więcej czasu pani
I gave a bit more time to Anna on purpose. Anna is at the back. She's creating our graphic notes, and it is to show us an image of our discussion, like graphic reflection of our discussion. You may take a photo of this graphical note. We'll definitely show it towards our session once again. It is quite inspiring. It is a challenge to come up with something like that within 30 minutes. Who could do that? Well, not too many of us, I guess. I think we are ready now to start with the first question that we would like to ask to you using the Menti tool. So please reach for your mobile phones. It will be simpler to take a photo of the QR code because it will take you straight to the question, or you may enter this internet address and enter the code, a very simple code, I must say, of 8 digits. So please log in. We'll hold this code here for a minute longer. I think you are ready by now. It is a very important question and the only open question that we are going to ask to you. And now I believe we need to see the question. All right, so there will be two linguistic versions of this question, in Polish, in English. Are we ready with our question? I think I can read it out. What should be supported by Interreg after 2027?
Support after 2027.
So please try and come up with an answer in a very brief way, in a few words. We'll have a moment for that and try to answer this question on the basis of your experiences, your reflections. I don't need to add that this tool is anonymous. Maybe it will be helpful in providing the answers. So feel comfortable. Think about your answers, what was missing, and what should be supported by Interreg after 2027. I believe the answer to this question is of tremendous importance. So we can see some answers now. I mean, our technical support can see them now, but all of us will see them in the tag cloud formula after our discussion. So please answer this question. What should be supported by Interreg after 2027? We'll see whether there will be elements that were not discussed enough previously. I'm quite curious about that. Now, let us try and look ahead into the future in the form of a panel discussion. It will be divided into two sections. We are going to talk about the future of Interreg programs after 2027. I think that some outcomes, well, because everyone here in the room know what Interreg is about and what its outcomes look like in practice, but the impact on reality and the storytelling behind them. I think the speaker referred to that yesterday, talking about hope and inspiration that they generate. These are extremely important outcomes as well. On the basis of our experiences so far, we know that the interest in these programs is very high. There are so many applications and transborder areas. Interpret these projects as the ones of special significance, and you can see that in the Boosting Growth or Living Lab or B-Solution initiative, so European Commission reports. So now I believe it is time to welcome our panelists, and they will try to provide us with answers to our questions. So sit wherever you want, and let me begin with Hynek Bym, who is a professor of the University of Opole. Welcome.
Jest dziś z nami również Irene McMaster.
Irene McMaster, an expert on knowledge exchange at the Centre of Research on European Policy, University of Strathclyde, Glasgow.
Niels Andersen,
the Regional Municipality of Bornholm. Welcome.
Olena Feleniuk,
Director of Coordination Department at the Technical Assistance at the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine. And there is also Rafał Baliński, Director of the Territorial Cooperation Department, Ministry of Development Funds and Regional Policy.
I jak mówią w świecie anglosaskim,
last but not least, Sławomir Tokarski, Director for European Territorial Cooperation and Program Implementation. Welcome.
Pochwyćmy mikrofony, sprawdźmy, czy działają.
Let's grab our mics and test them.
Let's see if our microphones are working to start with, because just to remind you, I will be asking some questions in Polish, some questions in English. It's going to be all about integration and multilingual communication. Let's see how it goes. Let me start with a general question. Please answer in Polish or in English. What do you like about your job the most? Who would like to start? It's a bit of a surprise question, I know. What do you like the most about whatever it is you feel is your everyday at work? Who would like to start?
Well, maybe I do. And I think, well, first of all, I really like what I do. And the reason is that I basically, on everyday basis, I can see the projects like the one that we've seen right before, which are bringing this message of hope against this rather bleak background of what's happening around us. So I feel really privileged because I think my work is bringing these messages of solidarity, understanding, trust, so different from what we see around.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Anyone?
Well, at home I have colleagues working in some departments where they are not so popular. Sometimes we have to lock the doors because angry parents or other could come and threaten them. I'm the good guy. I help people. I always give advice about financing or European matters and so on. And that's what I like with my job. I like to help people.
Niels, for whatever reason, the microphone decided to censor the angry parents part.
Yes.
I'm not sure if there is any symbolic relevance to that.
Maybe.
But to be fair, lawyers would probably say that my question was a leading question because I asked you, what do you like? And there is an assumption in this question that you actually do like something about your job, which may not necessarily be the case. So anyone else would like to address this question? It's not obligatory.
Yeah, I'll do my best. I'll do my best in Polish, taking the privilege. This is my mother tongue, so maybe it's a bit easier. However, to, co wydaje mi się, że ta praca
I think that my job gives me a lot of satisfaction because I can observe great outcomes, great results of cooperation projects. We could see some examples a moment ago. And at the same time, I like my entire team with whom I work at the ministry. And what is even more important, I guess, I feel personally that it is like an energy boost because I have so much contacts with many colleagues, friends who think so highly of our work, I think, on the basis of our contacts. So colleagues from abroad, like Olena from Kiev, with whom we have cooperated since quite recently, I have to say, but at the same time, I would say it is a very promising cooperation. We have achieved quite a lot in this limited time frame because it started rather recently. Thank you.
I think you have traveled the longest distance to be here with us, haven't you?
No, well, fair distance.
So is there anything you like about your job in the first place?
Yes. Well, coming to events like this is
feel free to say
hard.
Well, feel free to say you hate it if you do.
Yeah, getting to see Krakow and things like that. But I think particularly working on Interreg, it's the fact that there isn't an everyday routine to the job. It's so diverse. It covers so many different topics that one day you're speaking to somebody about a project involving reindeer migration patterns, and another day you're talking to somebody about a project involving saving lives in mountains and things like that. And it's so diverse, you can't really get bored, and you do get to go lovely places, which is a bonus.
So in other words, you don't want your days to be predictable, exactly the same, meeting the same people every day?
No, Interreg's never predictable. I think that's what makes it
I
fun.
think most of the room would agree with you on that. Anyone else would like to say something on this?
Tak, jeśli mogę.
Proszę.
If I may, thank you very much. Well, they stole my answers, I have to say. Well, but you had more time to think it over. Well, I've read that Poles spend the biggest amount of time at work in Europe. Well, perhaps it might be true for some Polish universities, but for me it is important that work has three things. It makes sense, it is meaningful, so it is true, as my colleagues were saying, it is meaningful. Secondly, you don't need boredom. So yes, if you have trans-border cooperation, well, it is not boring, it is never boring, it is joyful, it's fun. And the third aspect, well, almost every day, if you work in Interreg, you meet great people. It is so important for me. I work at a university, so work with young people, it is excellent. I steal a bit of energy from them, from the youth. So a lot of energy so far. Hynek, you reminded me of a Chinese philosopher who said, find a job you love, you will never work a single day in your life. Excellent.
Well, I'm from Ukraine, and as you know, my country is in war, unfortunately. And this war caused a lot of damages and needs. In my current position, I'm responsible for attracting and coordination of international technical assistance. And why I like my job is that it gives me an opportunity to serve my country, my people with my talents, and to help to solve at least some needs which are in Ukraine.
Thank you so very much. Taka maleńka prośba do reżyserki w tym momencie.
A request to sound engineers, because we can hear a translation from the screen to the right, if you could do something with the sound, perhaps. So a basic question, a question to you, director, so do not look away. I'm just looking at you. No, I'm just checking the time. It will not help you, but because there's more than 1 hour, like 1 hour and 9 minutes. Oh, so it is still too little. We'll see about that. Okay, it is not easy to provide answers to seemingly simple questions. Like, why do we need Interreg specifically in this specific formula? So let us begin with that question. I think that since yesterday I have heard certain words so many times, like the words war, threats, but also cooperation in so many contexts. I believe it is so much easier for me to provide you with the answer. Cooperation in the formula, which we are given, all of us taking advantage of that. Well, it is simply very beneficial to the entire society, all EU citizens, but also people in partner countries. So the formula has been tested, it was well tested, it's been successful, so there is a need to continue that. And I believe that apart from the fact that Ukraine is experiencing a huge tragedy because it was attacked more than 1,000 days ago, there was a full-scale war there. At the same time, we are also a victim of various hybrid attacks that have already been mentioned as well. And I'm quite concerned when I observe the situation in the Baltic Sea. I'm thinking about the energy infrastructure. Plenty of fake news that falsify the image of the reality. And we need to be very careful, very alert, and very focused to differentiate, because what is true and what is not true, which definitely has a big impact on our current situation, that also mentally, psychologically, we feel that we are threatened. It weakens us, it weakens EU citizens in general, I would say. And at the same time, it evokes memories of tragic events of our past. And the history of Central and Eastern Europe specifically was very complex, turbulent. I've heard about this history quite a lot more directly, because in my childhood I spent a lot of time at the home of my grandparents, and last week there was Grandfather's Day, and I had some reflections connected with that. I remember when we sat together in the evening, and we sat at the table in a small room. My grandparents were teachers, and my grandfather was sitting in his armchair. And it was like a feast for me and my brother, because our grandfather started telling stories about difficult fates. But he was doing that in such a picturesque way, and I was listening with open mouth, actually. and he was telling us stories of various stories of occupation, German occupation. He was a member of the Home Army during the Second World War. And he was telling us stories about throwing back grenades before they went off. He threw them back towards the enemy. So I was very much impressed, and I would say it made an impact on my entire life. And I guess I would remember that forever, just like the image of my grandfather, who was determined, very courageous, principles, and the material side of life was actually not very important to him. He left behind several medals that we inherited. And a motorcycle, a very old motorcycle, WSK. It was the motorcycle produced under the communist Poland. So perhaps we should add it was very popular because there was no other choice, the only available motorcycle under the communist Poland. Yes, and just last week I had reflections like that, and I started thinking about my grandfather, and I found information on the internet that he left some chronicles behind because he was an editor-in-chief of a certain journal, and he was writing down some notes, taking down some notes for half a year, so making like a chronicle, impressions, experiences from the period when he was in the Home Army, like a partisan army in forests of central Poland. They were supposed to support Polish capital city in the summer of 1944. He was taking notes in like a small notebook, and he handed it over to his commander before the activity of the squad was over, and there was like experiences, emotions, impressions of this difficult time under the occupied Poland in the Home Army, and they had no equipment, they were starving, they didn't have clean water. I'm not talking about cleaning or washing clothes, I'm talking about drinking water. I'm talking about that because for me it is memory, it is remembrance. I guess we have to hand it over from generation to generation because it will shape relations between countries, between nations. And to me personally, I have to say I am motivated also in this way, motivated to further support cooperation in Europe, cooperation under Interreg, because I am convinced that the common denominator of all these joint projects of cooperation, regardless of whether they are projects in health protection or other problems, or like two cities as the one that we have seen, but basically it boils down to friendships, to relations, to people doing things together, being involved and committed in projects together, so it is easier for them to attain certain goals. They do not need to do it individually. At the same time, they become more conscious of the needs of their partners, of other people. They change their perspective on certain things, so they're more mindful of others, because usually a person is limited to their own perspective only. So thanks to that, to this mindfulness, it brings simply people closer. And even though our resources in these programs are more limited, they are still a lean but powerful arm which gives you support in these difficult, unstable times.
Thank you very much for this very personal point of view and perspective on this concept that we are discussing here. You reminded me of the year 2022 that has been mentioned before. It's easy to talk about investment projects because they are something tangible, but it's more difficult to understand how they influence the cooperation between countries and regions that is very largely based on relationships. In the EU, what you usually do is you try to consult things, diagnose things, take stock of things. We already have the results of the harvesting project with us. We have some data that has has been collected internally. So can we say that there are some clear directions or the need for change in the next perspective?
Maybe first I would say that these were not so standard consultations, right? Because for the first time, I think in the history of Interreg, and I would maybe even claim that these were the most extensive consultations concerning any European policy instrument, at least for this financial perspective. So we asked the opinion not only of the programs themselves, but we also asked the opinion of the major stakeholders, and it was the opinion of the citizens. And we are so often here talking about place-based and territory. Territory also means the people who are living in the territory. And they also should have an occasion a chance to give their own opinion about what should be done and how Interreg should be working there. So I think we have about 10,000 replies. That's a lot. We are still working on the citizen part. I would say that the overall orientation is towards continuation. There is a lot of recognition for what we achieved so far. Joint management of the program, joint design of the program. Partnership, we heard today on many occasions how important it is that there is this element of trust which allows us to do things that are new, innovative, different. There is some concern about RRF model. I will not hide it. There is some concern what will happen to the financial allocation of the Interreg, because last time, for the first time, we saw a certain decrease in the amount of money given to Interreg. I think there is one interesting thing coming out of the citizens' replies, which is that maybe contrary to the intuition, because we often present both areas as peripheral, coping with the difficult access to public services, and so there are quite many people who actually like living close to the borders. Maybe because there is this very different reality just behind, and you can cross the border so easily, you can work with something which is different, but there is, I think, this emotionally rewarding element of cooperating with your neighbor, which is also quite easily finding its way to the imagination of the young people, because it also came quite strongly from the young people who we consulted as well.
Or you can check where petrol is cheaper at any given moment in Germany or in Poland. That's also on the practical side. But going back to the question about directions in the future, do you sense, based on this extensive study, 10,000 people submitted, well, I was tempted to ask you if you used AI to process all that information, but that's a separate question. More importantly, though, is there a clear sense of expectation that something should be changed perhaps a little or significantly in the future, for the future perspective?
Well, the AI we are using is sitting just next to you. I think the expectations are quite clear. And I think these expectations are also putting a sort of burden of responsibility on us as the Commission, because we bothered all those people, we asked their opinion, and there is a question what will happen now to the results of the consultation. But I think that we have a sort of extra democratic legitimacy. You know, we are living in the year of democracy. We played participative democracy with the citizens. We managed to get out of them, you know, their aspirations, their hopes related to Interreg. So we have a good basis of saying this is how Interreg should look like. There are some elements where we might be adding something. I think one interesting element was coming out from the conversation with young people, which was this more people-to-people project, more small projects, because they found them quite useful. And the value of them was going far beyond the economic value, if you want, right? We often tend to talk about jobs and growth. There is much more to that. And when we are talking with young people about the future of Interreg, we had a sort of story from a young Bedouin lady who got the grant in the framework of MED program, which is operating in the Mediterranean basin. And this grant was for the community, and she was saying how much self-assurance, how much hope the fact that they managed to obtain this grant gave to all of them, how they perceive themselves as a community, and how this motivates them to do more. And so this is the value, emotional value, which goes far beyond the economic impact. It sometimes may be even more important than the economic impact itself.
Fair enough. Sławomir, would you say that enough effort is made to figure out if this is really the right way to go about in the future, or something else could be done still?
Well, I mean, it's a bit difficult to answer this question because I think we, meaning the technical level, we have a quite clear idea where we should go. And I think more or less this is aligned with what people expect, maybe with some elements of RRF approach that we cannot ignore because this is the model that is in the town. We have to think a little bit about milestones, about targets, about quality expenditure.
It's actually very good news because it sounds like there is a lot of complex feedback analysis going on in the background, so to say.
Yes, I mean, this work with the programs and this work with citizens was also very instructive to us because even when choosing the questions to be asked to the citizens, we have to a little bit put ourselves in their shoes and try to look at the program from less, maybe not such a usual way as we usually do. So there is a lot of thinking, but again, we are living in the era of politics. We are also dependent on the final shape of the cohesion policy because Interreg, one way or another, is linked to the cohesion policy. We have to remember that the financial negotiations, member states tend to look much more for their own financial envelopes rather than for the Interreg, which is separate and which is for all of them. So, you know, I'm modestly optimistic. I know what we shall do, but to be seen.
Thank you very much. Let's keep things a little longer in the spirit of optimism. Niels, I'm told that there are overall like 530 EU projects. There are some merger proposals from the Committee of Regions, and apparently there is the idea that this particular budget category should be doubled. That's always good news, I suppose. And that it should be like 8% of the total cohesion fund figure. What do you think about it? It's all good news or not?
For us, and from my point of view, it's a very good news. But now we're talking about the Committee of Regions and the proposals from November to double up the Interreg part of the cohesion funds. And we know there is a discussion, at least since September last year, in the Commission about these 530 different programs. Can we somehow make a big reform? I always get suspicious when I hear words like reform and simplifications and mainstreaming. From the Commission, I fully understand that it's easier with 50 programs than 530 programs, but you will just switch the problem to the member states if they are going to have the programs. From my side, there is a very clear connection between the overall budget of the European Union and the cohesion policy and Interreg. So I would say to have a Europe with a single market but no cohesion policy will be a disaster, because it will simply be survival of the fittest, the richest regions, the central region, and there will be millions which will be left behind. But a cohesion policy without an Interreg part will also be problematic, because Interreg represents the most clear European dimension of the cohesion policy. So that's why that answers somehow the question, why Interreg? And I think the best proof of the Interreg is the project we have heard about. It really gives. And I also like very much the people-to-people approach. I said this is not the intervention logic is filling a very much output and results and indicators, and unfortunately we have a risk losing the human, which we have clearly seen, the value. I would like indicators for working together, cooperating, and all the intercultural dialogue, capacity building, these kind of things I would like also indicators for, because I think these are really European values we should have, and Interreg is a very good case for that. Thank you.
There is... Well deserved. Niels, there is apparently also a proposal for a merger in the next time frame between Central Baltic, Interreg, and South Baltic.
That was a problem, in fact, twice. And again, I fully understand if I was sitting in Brussels in DG Regio and should think about what is easy. There has been a proposal to merge the Central Baltic and South Baltic, which I think is a really stupid idea, because it's two totally socioeconomic different areas.
You didn't beat about the bush there, did you?
No. No, but I think the place-based approach is very important and for the cohesion policy, but also for the Interreg. And here I think there, of course we can talk about urban-rural cooperation because there are metropolitan areas in the Central Baltic, but it will simply be, I would say, there will be so much risk that, like in the national policies, regional policy, often it's the urban area, it's the metropolitan area which score the main sources. So I think in the South Baltic program we have a very good cooperation, and I think the socio-economic, there are disparities, but I think we have very much the equal challenges. So I think merging again, it will not suit what is the whole idea of the Interreg, and here again I have the people-to-people dimension.
Thank you so very much. Olena, can we move to you? Thinking about this entire Interreg program and the initiatives that are part of it, from Ukrainian perspective, which of those efforts do you consider to be the most relevant, the most important, the most impactful?
Despite the all severe challenges Ukraine experienced since the beginning of Russia full-scale military invasion of Ukraine, the country keep working on its integration to the EU. And the Interreg program, I would say, played its special role and make an important contribution to the integration process. Maybe I would highlight the most important aspects, for example, it's cross-border cooperation itself. The Interreg stronger partnership between Ukraine and neighboring EU countries, enabling the joint resolution of challenging situations such as critical challenges such as the infrastructure, connectivity, environmental sustainability, and social inclusion. Another one important aspect is that adaptation of Ukrainian legislation to the EU acquis. Interreg gives the opportunity to Ukrainian communities to align their practice with the EU standards. Then they can improve the governments and improve transparency. Another important aspect is that Interreg proposed the inclusive financing mechanism. Given the straight financial resources in Ukraine, the program offers access to the findings, which we may not otherwise be available for Ukrainian participants. And maybe the last one, but not least, is about the capacity building and knowledge sharing. By engaging with the EU partners, there's the possibility for Ukrainian beneficiaries to develop and get the critical skills in terms of the project management and financial oversight and again compliance with the EU norms.
Let me just add, Olena, what I'm sure everyone in this room is thinking, maybe even right now, is that all of your efforts as Ukraine internationally in the aspects of integration of the EU, also as beneficiaries of the Interreg program, have been unbelievably impressive. I think Ukraine should be congratulated on that. I'm sure you'll all agree. Hynek, let me go to you, because this was already mentioned, and switching back to Polish. Małe projekty.
The small projects, they are very often discussed in terms of their special importance and value. The more streamlined the procedure, the greater the accessibility of these projects, the more relevant they become. I believe that these projects are very important, and if I could, I would make the entire Interreg program based on small-scale projects only. Of course, I don't want to make this an official proposal, but I would just like to emphasize emphasize how important these projects are. My first experience related to cross-border cooperation came as I worked in the Śląsk-Cieszyński and Silesian region. I come from the area of Cieszyn and the Polish and the Czech Cieszyn. So these are two regions that I worked in, and back in 2001 we decided to implement a project inviting young people from two high schools in Poland and a high school from the Czech Republic, and we decided to organize an informal competition between young people from these three schools. And we have the various disciplines, various competitions. So in the first round we had Team A from one school pitted against Team B, and after the first discipline, the first ambulance had to arrive on site. After the second competition, yet another ambulance had to be called. And then we had a meeting of the crisis staff because the teachers became restless. They were afraid that the students would suffer. So we had to change the model. So we didn't have a competition between the Polish people and the Czech people. We organized different color-coded teams, and that worked so much better. And that was the beginning of a new cooperation. Actually, people started establish new friendships. We even had one couple that was formed, a romantic couple, and they have been together ever since. People say that thanks to the Erasmus program, 3,000 people, 3,000 children have been born. So I'm sure that the Interreg program has had this additional bonus as well.
It is a hidden mission of the program. Why should it be hidden? Well, and on a more serious note, and the key word is, well, while these programs are valuable, well, the word is trust, because it builds trust, it builds cooperation, not only between participants of the projects, but between the teams. With my Polish friends, we've cooperated for years, like since 2001. We are friends. It is more than just about cooperation. From a more scientific point of view, at least I will try to come up with some perspective, because I represent a university, so I should. So I am convinced that cross-border cooperation has at least 5 basic dimensions. The first dimension, in my opinion, is as follows. There is an element of regional development, and I guess there is a problem how to embed Interreg in the cohesion policy, because, well, this mental, ideological cohesion, yes, but is it really about economic cohesion, like the entire cohesion policy? I'm not so sure. Interreg is a bit different here, and it is extremely valuable, and regional development, as I'm saying, is definitely fueled by differences. So, like these attacks of German attacks or Czech attacks against Polish Orlen filling stations. Well, different stories with the Lidl lobby, the Ronka stores, attacks meaning large groups of people arriving there. The second aspect is place-based approach. I guess it makes it possible to have cooperation at various levels, multi-level management, so like cities, regions can be included, and well, it works very well in transborder cooperation. I come from this funny state, the south of Poland. In Poland, you seem reasonable because you have 2,500 municipalities per 40 million, and we have only 10 million people in the Czech Republic, but we have 6,500 municipalities. What does it mean? It means that there are so many small municipalities in transborder areas, and this transborder cooperation is the only European dimension of the various activities. It is the only thing that they really do in this aspect, and without Interreg, and especially without microfunds, they wouldn't be included did, they wouldn't be involved. I am deeply convinced it would be like that, 200% sure. I have to say very clearly that some of the borders have a very painful past behind them, so microfund might be a perfect tool for reconciliation, post-conflict reconciliation. We don't need to go in this direction in a too detailed way, but all these dimensions taken together give us everyday European nature and so many benefits. Thank you. Yes, Hynek, I'm thinking now that perhaps only Northern and Western Europe, if such sports competition would be held there, perhaps there will be even more ambulances. Over to you, Irene.
We also had a lot of time to think about what it is you want to say. You're looking at the Interreg, especially Northern Europe Interreg programs from a researcher perspective, trying to figure out what hints you get from this research to streamlining the program further, to bring it closer to EU objectives. What are the first things that come to your mind when you think about it?
I think first thing is it's hard to imagine a way that all the Interreg programs aren't in line with the EU objectives, both current and forthcoming. I mean, when you look at what Interreg projects and programs are delivering in terms of their contributions, in terms of R&D, innovation activities, but also people-to-people links, taking each other out at sporting events and high levels of competition. So it fits in so many ways at so many levels, and because it's got that heart and soul in it as well, it's not jobs and growth, it's jobs, growth, people, trust, relationships. It's currently a good fit, and I think it will be a good fit in the future, especially with all the new challenges. And we've already seen in even the projects discussed today how through having that sort of trust and knowledge and links between people, an established project was able to sort of adapt to, hugely changed circumstances and, respond to new challenges. So I think it's well placed to make the change. We've heard about, obviously, a lot of focus on very tense and challenging borders. And a lot of the areas I've been working on longest, it's sort of far north, Arctic, Scandinavian, Nordic, where a lot of very pragmatic sort of neighbourly relations are taking place, and you would imagine everything is running smoothly. But also coming from the UK, where we now no longer have Interreg apart from the Peace Plus programme, it does make you realise the value in, as you were saying, recognising the work that needs to be ongoing just to maintain relations, and the value that really should be recorded and noted in Interreg's contribution to building, the knowledge and learning. And for this programming period, there was a bit of it needs to be results. You need to meet targets. We need to measure this and meet that number. And I think a little bit got lost in that focus when it comes to really appreciating the value in the relationships and the knowledge.
Correct me if I'm wrong, please, but it sounds like to me that we have gathered all the biggest optimists around Interreg programs in Europe in this panel. It's almost making me feel suspicious, because when you research it, what would be, are there any kind of micro changes that you feel are especially relevant, especially important for the future perspective of the program? Are there things coming out from your research that you genuinely feel would significantly improve the impact or maybe the objectives?
I think one of the big changes, it's not necessarily the Interreg programs, it's the external environment. I mean, there's so much talk about, it was even the sort of director of my centre, when he was talking about interregional relations, he was talking about them happening in a parallel universe. And there's talk about this Interreg bubble that we're all supposed to be part of. And there's this idea that Interreg isn't connected to this wider network of policies and the big important bits of policies, and we're doing lots of small projects and things. But there is, especially at the project level, but also at program level, so much effort, particularly in this programming period, put into dissemination, sharing knowledge, going to events sort of linked to specific themes that projects are working in. And it would just be nice if there was sort of a greater awareness from on the side of the other programs, the sort of the big regional programs, the national government sort of interventions linked to regional policy. Because, you know, all the discussion about the competitiveness compass and, you know, focus on having to, you know, support and drive competitiveness and the potential in cooperation. And there's so much know-how and knowledge and expertise in Interreg projects, programs, and the wider Interreg community that, you know, you could share so easily. And it would be sometimes nice if there was a bit of a more receptive audience. And you see a little bit of change. There was some discussion yesterday about the slight differences in approach between net payers and the net contributors to cohesion policy generally, and the fact that some countries, Ireland was an example that was mentioned, which was a big beneficiary of cohesion policy, but has now got a smaller pot. And it used to not really pay that much attention to Interreg other than the peace programme, really. And particularly this programming period, because they have less money coming through the other routes, they got really involved and engaged at sort of national government level in the Interreg programs. And I think sometimes you can see a slight shift and more sort of reception to the idea of what territorial cooperation can bring. So again, ending on an optimistic note.
Good. Optimism is much welcome. Thank you, Irene. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the first round of our panel discussion. Let's see what you wrote in response to our first mentee question. Let's see what we can find here. Just to remind you, the question was, what should Interreg programs support after? Quite a number of categories. Now, these would be like very relevant, very important areas, but they're also buzzwords of the media world that we live in. Hopefully the organizers will make it available to you. If you feel like taking photos, please do, but we'll do our best to make it available after the panel discussion. In the meantime, there will be more time to take a look. In the meantime, let's go to the second question, which hopefully should be a lot easier, a lot more straightforward. Let's take a look at it. But before we do, once again, you need to scan the code, please, the QR code. We'll show it to you in a second. Just a minute. Hopefully, we will not have to stand up and move away for everyone to scan the code. Niels, it's a tiny, tiny suggestion. Let's see if we can scan it. Panie dyrektorze, wygląda na to, że zasłaniamy trochę kod QR, ale
Director, I'm afraid we might be... Okay, I think it's possible to scan it anyway, don't worry.
And I think we can go to the question. Again, everyone? Yeah, it looks like no one is using the phones now. Question. What would make Interreg 2027+ more attractive? And you can choose a maximum of 3 out of 6 proposed. Now, we are really making it slightly more difficult for our audience to see it, but let's do our best. So the choice that you're asked to make is it higher level of co-financing, more off-the-shelf simplified cost options? Is it higher advance payments, N+3 rule for the last year of implementation? Is it exclusion from state aid rules? Or is it maybe more flexibility for transfers between priorities? Proszę pozwolić, że odczytam również po polsku.
And now I'm reading these answers in Polish as well. So I'm actually repeating what I have just said in English.
Jednak wybierzmy 3 opcje spośród 6 dostępnych. Czy jest to wyższy poziom współfinansowania, więcej gotowych uproszczonych opcji kosztów, wyższe płatności zaliczkowe, zasada N+3 dla ostatniego roku wdrażania, wyłączenie z zasad pomocy publicznej, czy też większa elastyczność w transferach między priorytetami. Wyniki zobaczymy po drugim bloku dyskusji. Wybieramy
So you will see the answers after the second round of questions and answers. So everyone should choose up to 3 answers out of available 6. So now let us start the second round of questions, and we have only 30 minutes for this round.
Speaking of expectations of changes, which of these changes are likely to improve the implementation of programs and projects in near future? Will the European Commission propose the application of the new performance-based approach accounting rules? A question to you, sir.
Well, let's maybe, because this is a dodgy question, but I mentioned before that we need to reflect on some form of relationship between the idea of reforms and milestones and the Interreg programs, right? So what I can say here is that this can be done, but this must be done in a sensible way and together with the program. So we can agree on milestones for reforms that I tailor to the scale of the programs, that I tailor to the competencies that programs have, and that sometimes can be like, you know, a series of small steps in the right direction. And we also got quite a lot of food for thought in our work on B solutions, where we are trying to see what kind of barriers exist for cross-border cooperation. So I'm using often this example that if we manage to agree with the program area that they need to set up a common ticketing system for public transport there, or that they need to coordinate the timetables for public transport, or that they need to do something together in the area of health, that for us could be reformed. It will be the approach which is based on performance. So I think this is the way we see the approach inside, you know, at our level. Meaning that yes, reforms, yes, but they should be really suited to what the programs need and to what the programs can do. So I think this should be the reply.
Thank you. Fair enough, I suppose. Niels, cohesion policy programs are still seen by many as requiring further simplification. When you hear something like that, what's your first response? And please try and avoid the S word.
As I said before, I always get suspicious.
Not that one.
I've been dealing with Interreg programs since '94 in November. And simplification is a term coming up every time we are preparing new programs. And we are all shouting for simplification. For me, always the big question is, for whom? Because reducing the number of programs by merging South Baltic and Central Baltic will simplify things, at least in the Commission and in a member state level. But and if you could avoid the state aid rules, which I am fond of, but I think there are maybe some doubts, but it will simplify for the managing authority and the program secretariat. While if you could, if you want to help on the level of beneficiaries and applicants, I think that's important. How can you simplify? And here we have to accept, I have to accept there is a limit. Because, of course, you need also be sure that the money is spent correctly. Because we all taxpayers also.
And for that to happen, I would imagine you need to be friendly to newcomers as potential partners.
Yes. I would say the main tool for me is technical assistance. In the South Baltic program, we have, since the very beginning, have regional contact points. It means that I can support potential applicants, beneficiaries, also in the implementation on Bornholm, in a Danish language, and I can try to explain and find the page in the program manual and help them to find partners, etc., etc. And I think this is a good example on how I think we should be more. Now the technical assistant regime, I might say, in this generation, 21 to 20, has been worsened because now it's 7% of the spendings. It means you have to wait years. So there are some weakness now, but we still have the regional contact points. And I think simplifications for the beneficiaries now, of course you can have more simplified cost options, maybe. More lump sums, maybe. That will be better. But I think we have almost reached the limit how much more you can simplify. So that's why we need technical assistance, and it has to be close to the target group.
So technical assistance is essentially key, even when you think about those newcomer partners, because these programs are extremely popular for those categories, aren't they?
Yes, and you can be proactive, because this is not just having an office where you can go. I think many of you, and I know it from other programs, are proactive. So we go out and tell the museums or the green companies or whatever, so we can address them more directly. And we can do that much better on a local scale instead of a social media campaign, which is useful, but it cannot stay alone. We must have the local support.
Well, last night, ladies and gentlemen, someone made a very unfortunate mistake of seating us next to each other at dinner. We started talking, and after 2.5 hours, we still didn't finish talking. And we talked about the whole of the European history for the past 50 years or so, and that was only just one topic of many we covered at dinner, barely eating in between. So that's what happens as part of integration between complete strangers late in the evening in the middle of Kraków. Hinek, quick question. Po polsku.
A question in Polish. You mentioned that small projects should receive more attention. So I think that you would like to replace all bigger projects with small-scale projects. And I'd like to ask you about simplification of costs. Which groups would be most interested in that? Do you want a quick answer? Well, hopefully. Well, first of all, let me emphasize one thing. We have had 30 years of experience with Interreg, but still cross-border cooperation is difficult. There are still some mental barriers in place, so we need to overcome them in order to make this cross-border cooperation as streamlined as possible, because still at this point I think there are certain groups such as small communes, certain NGOs or schools that do not have the administrative capabilities to administer all of that. So simplified mechanisms and forms would be very beneficial. I think that we should work on that. We should work with existing partners on that as well. And on a positive note, I would like to say that my experience shows that those simplified mechanisms have been working very well in many areas. And I think that we should make things as user-friendly as possible.
Nie spodziewałem się.
I didn't expect that.
It gives me more time for the question that I want to ask. Maybe I will change the order a little. Olena, can I go to you for now, for a while? Think about the past lessons from the Interreg program and the simplifications and implementation rules that you had to observe in the past. And when you think about the future, what would be those things that you would be especially keen to see changed, adjusted, adapted better?
Okay, let me share my observation as the part of the national authority. What we could see, let's say, in the past and could see even these days. The first one, it relates to the financial barrier. We still can see when the Ukrainian participants struggle to meet the traditional co-financing rate to fund the project. Over the state budget deficit and the local low incomes, unfortunately. Another one is what we can observe is that caused by external disruptions. It could cause with, for example, the missiles attack by Russia. Usually it targets energy infrastructure in Ukraine. And as a result, we can have blackouts. Some days we can have only 6-8 hours of electricity per day. Sometimes we can have just maybe 6-8 hours the lack of electricity. And it impacts the implementation and submission of application and the deadlines to complete the project. Another one is the continuous cyber attack. The last one was in December, and as a result, we had 6 weeks, the all state registries were down, so it caused administrative delay. Another one we could observe, it's related to maybe transparency in the selection of the projects. We could see that the high number of projects were cut from the short list. We would like to have some maybe more clarification or detailed clarification on the reasons of the rejection, as well as maybe some guidance on the improvement that will help the participants, applicants will have a better submission for the future. And another one is, we could also see is that the large-scale projects overshadow the small community-driven projects that definitely could have significant impact locally. Of course, for the government and the country, it's more important to have large projects as efficient transportation connectivity. But community, the local participants, they appreciate more when the small project helps, for example, to improve health services or to give the possibility to have schools for the kids with disability. So this is what we could observe, and it would be nice if there would be some in the programs. It would be some developed mechanism to give some flexibility based on the, let's say, current situation in Ukraine and what we have experienced so far.
In other words, your expectation, correct me again if I'm wrong, is that the way this process is taking place should be better tailored to specific circumstances you're in.
For example, as I said, sometimes we have a blackouts. It means no electricity at all. So you cannot use your computer to send or receive or make some submission. If it's more than 3 hours of the lack of the electricity, there is no internet connection. So it would be nice if the program will foresee some flexibility. For example, if we have such circumstances in Ukraine, so it's good to have some extension in terms of the deadlines to submit application or to the extent to complete the project.
I see.
Or another example concern the financial barriers. It would be nice if we will be grateful if the programs can consider as an exception, maybe some waiver for co-financing credit for Ukrainian participants, or some options like in-kind contributions or advance prepayment.
So you expect the system, because obviously we're dealing with unique circumstances, call them unique, call them abnormal, and every time unique circumstances actually require a tailored, adjusted way of dealing with them. So that's your key expectation. Fair enough? Thank you so very much. Irene, back to you. There are circumstances where the question of synergies between different instruments implemented in the same area, more or less, is an issue. So my first question is how, why? How is it the case, really? What are we talking about here? And another aspect to it would be, I understand territorial approach could be a solution somewhat to the problem. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, synergies, I'm going to sound like such a sort of
one of those big buzzwords
for Interreg, but again, Interreg has been quite sort of pioneering in actually trying to take a buzzword and make it happen in practice. And there are a number of Interreg B programs, the transnational programs that cover bigger areas, that I've worked with that have been sort of working on this for a long time now. For example, the Northern Periphery and Arctic Programme has set up a cooperation sort of system with the Interreg A programs within their territory. And just yesterday, I think, they were sort of jointly at the sort of big Arctic Frontiers Conference speaking about their sort of collaborative cluster projects where they take groups of projects that are funded through various programs and then maybe give them additional funding to really sort of follow through results or to capitalize on outputs and just disseminate things. The North Sea programme works quite closely with the North Sea Commission, which is a much wider, sort of more involving local politicians and stakeholders in the North Sea area. And they sort of work collaboratively at a strategic level. And similarly, the Central Europe programme has been working on a number of calls where it's working with Interreg A programs, but you could see opportunities as well to take that know-how and expand it out.
Is there anything that stands out that should and could be done to strengthen those synergies in your perspective, or future program perspective also?
Yeah, I think a big sort of point that's come across in lots of discussions and evaluations and things that I've done, and just, I mean, you'll be the same having been involved in territorial cooperation for a long time. You see that often results, the really meaningful results, are visible long after a project is finished and the programme stopped measuring things, and that sometimes those sort of results are sort of getting lost in the measuring processes. And so having, as was being trialled in those cases, I sort of outlined having sort of additional continuing funding for some key areas of interventions that are of interest to that territory would be one. Again, as I sort of hinted at earlier, trying to find routes and avenues to more discussion and consultation and engagement with mainstream cohesion policy programs would be interesting, basically because they've got the more money. So you could trial something in an Interreg program and then look at it getting carried forward. Similarly with Horizon Europe, there's a two-way relationship you could see there, where there's been a sort of more academic bit of research done, and there's potential through Interreg to transfer and become applied within an area, or vice versa. So there's lots of routes and avenues and opportunities, but linking also to your point about the sort of territorial dimension, there's also the sort of new, or not so new now, but integrated territorial investments, the community-led local development, which under the current programming period, Interreg programs were a bit, yeah, our life is complicated enough. We need to keep thinking of the S word, and working with these new, slightly experimental initiatives was something that only a few brave programs took on. But there's been sort of ongoing work and engagement with these more place sort of smaller scale place-based initiatives, but also within programs using functional areas to take a larger Interreg A program area and on some themes split it down to sort of smaller areas that, you know, there's maybe more of an opportunity to develop, you know, shared transport services, but that's not something that's going to apply for the whole area. So that sort of territorial place-based approach you can see sort of really beginning to embed in the programs and get taken forward.
Thank you very much, Irene. Thank you. Irene has brought some fans. Thank you again. Panie dyrektorze, wygląda na to, że zatoczyliśmy.
And now over to you, Director, once again, because we started with the question, why do we need Interreg? So perhaps towards the end, I will ask you about implementation of Interreg in the new perspective. In 2028, after 2027, what is the Polish perspective on that? So if you comment on our expectations or ways of implementation, what will it look like? Well, it will depend on the Commission, first of all, because the Commission is preparing new solutions for us, and I can understand the reasons and the need for that, because we need some changes which will have an impact on how future Interreg programs will be implemented. So on our side, what can we do? We can be involved as much as we can, and with the support of Sławomir Tokarski, we can hope also for an open and close discussion about these new solutions. At the same time, because I know Director Tokarski, so as much as I could have learned things about him, well, it sounded ominous, but, well, I think we can hope to be a partner in this implementation. I hope it will not be only about formal negotiations, but there will be also opportunities to have informal consultations and discussions around these new solutions. But I wanted to add one more thing. I think that there were so many interesting topics touched upon. To what extent the programs fit in with the cohesion policy? Well, they fit in there, definitely, because first of all, they have this territorial aspect, like territorial cooperation in Europe. Programs, their strategies are prepared in such a way that they have a specific territory in mind. They also have this element of regional development, which contributes to attaining the same goals of the cohesion policy, which are attained by other mainstream programs. And I think it would be a good idea as Interreg programs that we remain within the cohesion policy at the same time, because these programs have their special nature. We talk about cooperation, we have criteria for cooperation, we have partners, we have requirements. As to applications which are addressed to us, we also have tools like small projects or micro funds that Hynek has discussed so well. We would like to develop them, but not necessarily would like to fully finance them with the entire allocation. Well, I would say that it has all been tested very well, and maybe not all of these solutions, but the best solutions should be transferred to this new plan for member states. What else? I'd like to add one more thing, perhaps. It is something connected with Ukraine as well, because it is a topic close to my heart. Because on the one hand, I supervise personally the program of cooperation with Ukraine, and I remember like slightly less than 3 years ago, I went to Tatarów. I woke up, it is near Ivano-Frankivsk in Ukraine. I woke up in the morning just before the meeting with our partners in Ukraine, and I was quite concerned maybe also by the stress that I evoked in my teenage daughter, for example. She was traumatized to some extent because she was alarming me with text messages with so many constant questions, whether I'm all right, whether I'm healthy, whether I'm safe, because missiles were like landing left, right, and center there. So we changed the agenda for the day very fast. We started preparations to reorganize, to return to our countries, and I was thinking how to come back home safely. We couldn't take a flight, we couldn't fly from Kiev back to Poland at this point. So we decided not to cross the Ukrainian and Romanian border, because there were options like that. We decided to go on foot via the border crossing in Medyka, so Polish-Ukrainian border, and we had a person living in Lviv who took us into their car, and they took us towards the boarding crossings. There was problem with gas in the filling stations, so, well, we needed additional fuel and so on and so forth. So we reached the border, and we're hoping for a smooth procedure at the border. It wasn't that smooth. We had to go 8 kilometers on foot because there was like a long queue of vehicles, and when we reached the border crossing, there was another queue there. We spent like, I'm saying we because there was my colleague from the secretariat of the program. We spent the entire night there at the border crossing. Despite the fact that it was a difficult experience. One of the more difficult nights that I experienced in my life, because the food that we had for the trip was rather scarce. So we shared the food with other people. Someone shared some sweets with us. There was a very cordial, nice atmosphere, many foreigners. And I made a contact with sports team from Brazil. They participate in some sports competitions in Lviv. So we spent the entire night, crowded place at the border crossing. So after I crossed the border, I thought it is quite optimistic that on the Polish side there were like reception tents. We received something warm to eat, to drink, after many hours without anything to drink, actually, any water, any liquids. And then I realized everyone will look very intently at Ukraine, and it made me more aware how significant it is that we do. Because the significance even grew, it was even bigger. The European Union wanted to show solidarity to Ukraine since the very beginning, providing Ukraine with financial, military, humanitarian aid. We have a program of transborder cooperation within Interreg, supporting us in developing all these investments, but also relations, neighborly relations. And I think that Interregs will be continued. It would be good to notice and emphasize that there is this dimension of transborder cooperation with Ukraine, and there are so many opportunities. Obviously, so much needs to be done, as Elena was saying. From my perspective, I know more about the backrooms and the underbelly of these activities. So, well, if there will be smaller resources for these activities, it wouldn't be good, obviously. It would be good to go back to the financial portfolio that was possible during the last programming period, but the resources might be more limited, and then it would be good to change the ratio of like financial engineering in the neighborhood policy, because the neighborhood policy also has some financial input, contributes to transborder cooperation with EU partner countries, and due to the reality that we have around us, like the threats and the awareness that cooperation also supports and enhances a sense of security of citizens, because we build trust, we create mutual trust, we create a mutual sense of belonging, so all countries included in this policy should be taken into account, I believe. Thank you very much indeed. We have to stop here, because I've promised to the audience that there will be a chance to have at least one question from the audience. We are running out of time, but perhaps someone from the audience has some reflections, has an important and brief question. That's the moment for you. Anyone, don't hesitate. I can approach you with the mic. Do we have a question in the audience? Or can I start my round of thank yous? I guess we've discussed the subject matter.
We have two more things before we go. I'd like all of us to look at it, because we have the results of the second question we asked to our audience, and we will also have the graphic illustration of this panel discussion. Anna is hopefully almost ready by now. So this is the result. Hopefully you can see the coded proportions with colors. 26 is the biggest one. No, it's blue. It's 31. More flexibility for transfers between priorities. And 26 would be the next one, but they are pretty close, generally speaking. So it looks like whoever formulated those questions knows what they are talking about. Dziękuję Państwu bardzo za udział w tym drugim pytaniu. Zobaczmy jeszcze na koniec graficznie, na co pani Anna zwróciła szczególną uwagę w panelu dyskusyjnym.
All right, so let me now show to you this graphic note. It will stay here for a bit longer, because you may want to take a photo of the graphic note only without our heads.
The end of it. Thank you very much for a hugely productive discussion, sharing your viewpoints and perspectives. Panie i panowie, podziękujmy brawami naszym panelistom.
Now it's time for the applause for our distinguished panelists.
Thank you so very much. Szanowni Państwo, w konkluzji,
ladies and gentlemen, concluding, we've had a discussion about all the projects, initiatives. Obviously, we should continue our conversation for much longer. I guess I should quote the Speaker of the Polish Parliament once again. He was mentioning this aspect of hope when there is such a degree of polarization, aggression in the world, so many barriers, walls build up in the world. So it is of tremendous importance to be able to build a narrative around a new perspective around the Interreg program. It is not easy if we have 530 different projects, so this narrative is quite difficult and complex, but I believe a challenge for another time perspective is how we can convince the world around us that these initiatives are highly valuable. It is a great art to be able to have a narrative around this in such a way that no one questions the value of your work, and that's my wish for everyone for the next perspective. Thank you to all of the people who have worked so hard for this discussion to take place. Many thanks to interpreters who interpreted between Polish and English. Many thanks to sound engineers, to Anna, responsible for the graphic note. Thank you very much indeed, and there will be a concluding session in S1. It is about to begin. It will actually start at 2:15. Thank you.